You're
The
running
rain
again.
came down
Don't let
like
go, you
judgment
promised.
that
Everyone
September
leaves.
night
Daddy
in
left. Don't
Wyoming,
leave too.
hammering
I'm
the
not going
McKenna
anywhere.
Ranch with the
Promise?
kind
I
of
promise. We're
fury
family
that
now.
makes cattle huddle and grown men pray. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, illuminating the weathered barn, the sagging fence lines, and the lone figure of a woman standing on her porch with a Winchester rifle watching the storm like she was waiting for something worse. Sarah McKenna had learned to read storms the way other folks read newspapers. This one carried trouble in its belly. She could feel it in the way the wind shifted, could smell it mixing with the petrichor and pine. Her fingers tightened on the rifle stock, a habit she'd developed in the 18 months since Tom's death. The ranch felt too big without him, too quiet even in the thunder. From the window behind her, a small face watched. Emma McKenna, 7 years old and silent as stone, clutched her stuffed dog against her chest. The toy was missing an ear and most of its stuffing, but she held it like it was made of gold. Her blonde hair hung loose around her shoulders, uncombed for days. Sarah had stopped fighting that battle weeks ago. There were bigger wars to wage when your daughter hadn't spoken a single word since watching her father bleed out in the barn. Then came the knock. 3 solid raps that cut through the storm's chaos like gunshots. Sarah swung the rifle up before the third knock finished echoing. Nobody came calling in weather like this. Nobody with good intentions anyway. "State your business," she called through the door, voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. A man's voice came back rough and tired. "Need shelter from the storm, ma'am. I can pay." "Money's no good if you're dead. You armed?" "Yes, ma'am. Colt, .45 and a boot knife. But I'm not looking for trouble." Sarah considered this. She could see his shadow through the door's frosted glass, tall and broad-shouldered, swaying slightly. "You hurt." A pause. "Some." "How much is some?" "Enough that I'd rather not die on your porch, if it's all the same to you." Despite everything, Sarah almost smiled. At least he was honest. She glanced back at Emma, who had crept closer to the window, that ratty stuffed dog still pressed to her chest. The girl's eyes were wide, but curious, not afraid. That decided it. "Step back from the door. Keep your hands where I can see them." Sarah unlocked the door with one hand, keeping the rifle trained with the other. The man who stood in her doorway looked like he'd ridden through hell and decided to keep going. Water streamed from his black duster, his hat was gone, and blood seeped through a makeshift bandage on his left shoulder. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Gray as the storm clouds, steady, despite the pain, with the kind of weariness that had nothing to do with miles traveled. "Name's Cole Brennan," he said, hands raised slightly, rain running down his face. "I was heading for Laramie when the storm hit. Saw your lights. That wound fresh. 3 days old. Reopened this morning when my horse spooked at lightning." Sarah studied him for a long moment. She'd gotten good at reading men in the year and a half since Tom's death. The dangerous ones had a certain way of standing a looseness that meant they were ready to draw. This man stood careful, but not threatening, like he was more worried about bleeding on her porch than about her rifle. "You can sleep in the barn," she said finally. "There's hay in the loft water pump by the stalls. I'll bring medical supplies." "Much obliged." He started to turn, then paused. "Your daughter. She okay?" Sarah followed his gaze to where Emma stood, clearly visible in the window, now watching them both with those 2 serious eyes. "What makes you think she's not—" "Same thing that makes you hold that rifle like it's the only friend you got left." He touched the brim of his absent hat out of habit. "I'll be in the barn." She watched him walk away, his gait steady despite the wound. The rain had plastered his clothes to his frame, and she could see he wore his gun tied down gunfighter style. But there was something else, too. Something in the careful way he moved, like a man trying not to disturb the world around him. "Emma," she called softly. "Come away from the window." But Emma didn't move. She pressed one small hand against the glass, watching the stranger disappear into the barn. For the first time in 18 months, Sarah saw something other than grief in her daughter's eyes. It might have been curiosity. It might have been hope. It was definitely dangerous. Sarah secured the door and went to gather medical supplies, her mind racing. She didn't believe in coincidences anymore, not since the night Tom died. A wounded gunfighter showing up in a storm just when the Marcus Kane's gang had been spotted 3 counties over. It felt like the universe was either offering her help or serving her disaster on a silver platter. In the barn, Cole Brennan peeled off his wet coat with a grunt of pain. The wound was worse than he'd let on, but he'd been through worse. He'd survived Willow Creek. Hadn't he survived the screaming and the smoke and the small bodies that haunted his dreams? This was just flesh and blood. Those were things that could heal. He heard footsteps on the barn stairs and turned to find not the woman, but the girl. She stood at the top of the loft ladder, that stuffed dog dangling from one hand, studying him with eyes that belonged on someone who'd lived 60 years, not 6 or 7. "Your mama know you're here?" he asked gently. Emma didn't answer. Of course she didn't. He could see it now in the way she held herself, the way her mouth stayed firmly closed. This was a child who'd chosen silence like some folks choose armor. "That's a fine dog you got there," he said, easing himself down onto a hay bale. "What's his name?" Still nothing. But she came closer, close enough that he could see the faded blue of her dress, the mud on her bare feet. She reached out suddenly and touched the blood seeping through his shirt, then looked at her fingertips. "It's okay," he said. "Just a scratch. I've had worse." And in that moment, with the storm raging outside, and this silent child studying his blood like she was reading tea leaves, Cole Brennan realized he'd found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. Not redemption, he was too far gone for that. But maybe, just maybe, a place to stop running. Sarah found them like that 5 minutes later, Emma sitting cross-legged in the hay, while Cole told her a story about a horse that could count to 10. The girl wasn't smiling. Sarah hadn't seen her smile since Tom died, but she was listening with her whole body leaning forward slightly, that stuffed dog forgotten in her lap. "Emma McKenna," Sarah said sharply. "You get back to the house right now." Emma stood slowly, reluctantly, but before she left, she did something that made Sarah's breath catch. She pulled a button from her pocket, one of Tom's shirt buttons she'd been carrying since the funeral, and placed it carefully in Cole's palm. Then she was gone, scrambling down the ladder like a spooked cat. Cole looked at the button, then up at Sarah. "She doesn't talk, and not for 18 months. Sarah set the medical supplies down harder than necessary. "Not since her father died." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Just don't make it worse." She gestured at his shoulder. "Shirt off." "Let me see how bad that is." As she worked cleaning and stitching the wound with practiced efficiency that spoke of experience, the storm continued its assault on the ranch. But inside the barn, in the circle of lamplight, something else was happening. 3 broken people were about to discover that sometimes the worst storms bring exactly what you need, even when it looks like everything you should run from. The morning after the storm dawned clear and sharp, the kind of Wyoming morning that made the world look freshly painted. Sarah McKenna stood at her kitchen window, watching the stranger, Cole Brennan, work her fence line. He moved stiff but steady, his shoulder clearly paining him, but his hands were sure on the wire and posts. She'd told him he could leave after breakfast. He'd asked if he could fix the storm damage first. That was 3 hours ago. "You planning to stare at him all day, or you gonna actually talk to the man?" Sarah turned to find Martha Hendricks, her nearest neighbor and only real friend, settling her considerable bulk into a kitchen chair. Martha had arrived unannounced, as was her way, bringing fresh bread and gossip in equal measure. "I'm not staring," Sarah said, turning back to the stove. "Just making sure he actually knows what he's doing." "Uh-huh. And I'm just here for the coffee." Martha helped herself to a cup. "Town's already talking, you know. Sarah McKenna taking in a drifter, and a gunfighter at that from the look of him." "How would you know what a gunfighter looks like?" "Same way you do honey. The way they wear their guns, the way they watch everything like it might turn dangerous. My Robert was the same, God rest him." Martha studied Sarah over her cup. Question is, what's he doing here? Sarah poured her own coffee, choosing her words carefully. Needed shelter from the storm. He's fixing fence as payment. He'll be gone by sundown. Will he now? Martha nodded toward the window. Because from here, it looks like your Emma's got other ideas. Sarah whipped around. Emma had wandered out to where Cole was working that eternal stuffed dog tucked under her arm. She stood about 10 feet away, watching him with the intense focus she usually reserved for her drawings. Cole glanced at her, nodded like she was any other ranch hand come to inspect his work, and kept on fixing fence. She hasn't shown interest in anyone since Tom, Martha said softly. Maybe that's not a bad thing. A drifting gunfighter is exactly a bad thing, Sarah shot back. Emma doesn't need another man to disappear on her. No, but she might need someone who understands darkness. That girl's been living in shadows for too long. Before Sarah could respond, Cole's voice drifted through the open window. He wasn't exactly talking to Emma, more like talking to the fence while she happened to be there. Now, the thing about barbed wire, he was saying, is it's like people. Looks mean, keeps folks at a distance, but it's really just trying to protect something. You treat it with respect, understand its purpose, it won't hurt you none. Emma stepped closer, drawn by his voice. Your daddy teach you about fences? Cole asked, still not looking directly at her. Sarah held her breath. Nobody mentioned Tom to Emma. It was an unspoken rule. Emma didn't speak, but she moved her head in what might have been a nod. Good man to learn from then. Can tell by his work. These posts are set deep, proper-like. Man who builds like this, he's thinking about tomorrow, not just today. Cole finished wrapping a wire and tested its tension. He was planning on this lasting, making sure you and your mama were protected. Something shifted in Emma's posture, a loosening Sarah hadn't seen in months. I knew a man once. Cole continued his hands, never stopping their work. Lost his voice in the war, not from injury, just from seeing things that didn't fit into words anymore. Folks thought he was broken, but I figured he just decided there wasn't much worth saying. He talked when he was ready. Took him 2 years, but when he finally spoke, it was to tell the woman he loved that he was staying. Emma reached out and touched the fence post right next to where Cole's hand rested. They stayed like that for a moment, not quite touching, but connected somehow through wood and wire and understanding. Lord have mercy, Martha whispered. That man knows exactly what he's doing. Sarah wanted to argue, but the words died in her throat, because Emma was still standing there closer to another human being than she'd been in 18 months. And Cole was still talking, his voice low and steady, telling stories about horses and storms and men who found their way home. You need to know something, Sarah said, abruptly grabbing her shawl. Before you start thinking this is some kind of miracle. She strode outside, Martha huffing behind her. Cole straightened as she approached, and she saw him wince slightly at the movement. Emma, Sarah said firmly, go help Mrs. Hendricks in the kitchen. Emma looked between her mother and Cole, then walked slowly toward the house, dragging her feet in the dust. Ma'am, Cole said, touching his hat brim to Martha. Mr. Brennan, Martha replied, giving him a long, appraising look. You fix a fine fence. Thank you, ma'am. Martha headed inside, but Sarah caught her muttering, Lord knows this place needs more than fences fixed. When they were alone, Sarah crossed her arms and faced Cole squarely. You asked, what's wrong with my daughter? You want the truth. She watched her father die, shot in the stomach by Marcus Kane's gang when he wouldn't sell our water rights. Took him 3 hours to bleed out right there in the barn where you slept last night. Emma held his hand the whole time, wouldn't let go even after he was gone. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Marcus Kane. You know him. I know of him. Runs protection rackets, pushes folks off their land for the railroad companies. That's the polite version. The truth is, he's a killer who enjoys his work. Sarah's voice turned bitter. Tom stood up to him, said we'd never sell no matter what. Kane made an example of him. And the law. Sarah laughed short and harsh. The sheriff's Marcus Kane's cousin. The marshal in Laramie says without witnesses willing to testify, there's nothing he can do. And nobody's willing, not after what happened to Tom. Cole was quiet for a long moment, looking out toward the mountains. Your husband was a brave man. My husband was a fool, Sarah said, then immediately softened. No, that's not. Tom was good. Too good for this hard country. He believed in doing right, standing tall, protecting what's yours. Look where it got him. And you, Cole asked. What do you believe in? Sarah met his eyes directly. Surviving, keeping Emma safe. Nothing else matters. That why you let me in last night doesn't seem like the choice of someone only thinking about safety. I let you in because... Sarah paused, unsure herself why she'd opened that door. Because Emma needs to remember there are still people in this world who aren't trying to hurt us. But that doesn't mean I trust you, and it doesn't mean you're staying. Cole nodded slowly. Fair enough. I'll finish this section of fence and be on my way. But even as he said it, Sarah saw him glance toward the house where Emma stood at the window again, watching. Always watching. Why are you really here, Mr. Brennan? Sarah asked suddenly. A man like you doesn't just drift into a place like this by accident. Cole's hand stilled on the wire. Maybe I'm tired of drifting. Tired or running? He looked at her, then really looked at her, and Sarah saw something raw in his expression. Both. Been moving for 5 years since Willow Creek. You ever hear of it? Sarah shook her head. Government operation. Classified off the books. My unit was sent to clear out what we were told was a rebel encampment. Turned out to be just a settlement. Families. Children. His voice went flat. We followed orders. I followed orders. 37 dead, including 11 kids not much older than Emma. Sarah's hand went to her throat. My God. There is no God in what we did, Cole said quietly. Haven't been able to stay in one place since. Every time I try, I see their faces. But last night, your girl... He trailed off, shaking his head. She looked at me like I was just a man. Not a monster. Been a long time since anyone looked at me like that. She doesn't know what you've done. No, but she knows darkness. And she's not afraid of it. Cole went back to the fence. I'll be gone by sundown, Mrs. McKenna. But if you need help, if Kane comes around, you send word to Laramie. Ask for Cole Brennan at Murphy's Saloon. I'll come. Why would you do that? Because I couldn't save those kids at Willow Creek. But maybe I can help save one here. Sarah studied him for a long moment. This was a dangerous man, no doubt about it. Damaged, possibly beyond repair. But there was something else, too. Something in the way he'd handled Emma, the way he spoke about Tom's fence building. This was a man who understood loss, who knew what it meant to carry ghosts. There's more fence damage on the north pasture, she heard herself saying. And the barn door needs rehinging. I can't pay much, but there's meals and a place to sleep. Cole looked up surprised. Mrs. McKenna. Just for a few days, Sarah said quickly. Until you're healed proper. That shoulder's not going to hold up to hard riding, and we both know it. And Emma. You keep your distance. You don't fill her head with false hope. And if you're planning on leaving, when you're planning on leaving, you make it clean. No goodbyes that'll break her heart. Cole considered this. Those are hard terms. This is a hard world, Mr. Brennan. You, of all people, should know that. He nodded slowly. 3 days. I'll fix what I can. Then move on. Sarah turned to go, then paused. She hasn't shown anyone that button, not even me. Tom's shirt button, she's carried it since the funeral. The fact that she gave it to you. I'll keep it safe, Cole said simply, until she wants it back. As Sarah walked back to the house, she wondered what she'd just done. Martha was right, the town would talk. A widow taking in a gunfighter even for a few days would set tongues wagging from here to Cheyenne. But watching Emma at the window, her small hand pressed against the glass as she watched Cole work, Sarah thought maybe, just maybe, she'd made the right choice. 3 days. What could happen in 3 days? Inside the house, Emma picked up her charcoal and paper and began to draw. For the first time in 18 months, she didn't draw her father's death. Instead, she drew a man fixing fence while a storm cleared away, and a little girl watching holding a stuffed dog that wasn't crying anymore. The nightmare came for Cole Brennan just before dawn on his third day at the McKenna Ranch. It always started the same way, smoke rising from thatched roofs, the acrid smell of gunpowder, and then the screaming. Always the screaming. He jerked awake in the barn loft, his hand already reaching for the cold sweat soaking through his shirt, despite the cool morning air. "Just ghosts," he muttered, forcing his breathing to slow. Just ghosts. But knowing didn't make them leave. 5 years since Willow Creek, and he could still see every face. The old woman who'd tried to shield her grandchildren with her body. The young father who'd charged them with nothing but a farming scythe. The little girl, maybe 6 years old, who'd stood in a doorway clutching a corn husk doll too shocked to run. Cole sat up, running his hands through his hair. Through the loft window, he could see the McKenna house, a soft light already glowing in the kitchen. Sarah would be up starting breakfast. Emma would still be sleeping, curled around that stuffed dog like it could protect her from her own nightmares. He'd meant to leave yesterday, and the day before that. But each morning he'd found another reason to stay. The chicken coop needed reinforcing. The well pump was about to give out. The excuses were getting thinner, and they both knew it. A sound from below made him tense footsteps, but too light to be Sarah's. He peered over the loft edge to find Emma standing in the barn doorway barefoot, despite the morning chill, that eternal stuffed dog dangling from one hand. She was looking at the spot where her father had died. Sarah had scrubbed the blood away, but Emma stared at the clean boards like she could still see it. Cole climbed down the ladder, slowly making enough noise so he wouldn't startle her. Emma didn't move, didn't acknowledge him, just kept staring at that spot on the floor. "Can't sleep either, huh?" he said softly, settling onto a hay bale nearby. "Mornings are the worst. That time just before dawn when all the bad things feel real close." Emma's fingers tightened on the stuffed dog. "I knew a girl once about your age," Cole continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Back in Kansas before I became what I am now. My sister's daughter, Lucy, bright as a new penny, always laughing. She loved to draw just like you." Emma turned slightly just enough to show she was listening. "One day, Lucy saw something terrible. A man got trampled by horses right in front of her. Wasn't anyone's fault, just a tragic accident, but Lucy..." She stopped talking, stopped laughing, stopped drawing. For weeks, she just sat by her window, quiet as snow. Cole pulled Tom's button from his pocket, the one Emma had given him, turning it over in his fingers. Everyone tried to help her, told her it would be okay, that she needed to move on, to forget. But Lucy couldn't forget. How do you forget something that changed everything? Emma moved closer, drawn by the sight of her father's button. Then one day, an old Apache woman came through town. She told Lucy something I've never forgotten. She said, "Child, you don't need to forget the darkness. You need to remember that you survived it. Every sunrise you see is proof that you're stronger than the night." Cole held out the button. Emma looked at it for a long moment, then shook her head. She wanted him to keep it. Lucy started talking again eventually, Cole said. Not all at once, not even very much at first, but she found her voice when she needed it most. When her baby brother was about to touch a hot stove, Lucy yelled no, so loud it scared the cats out of the barn. A tiny sound escaped Emma, not quite a laugh, but something close to it. "Your daddy," Cole said carefully. "He must have been something special. The way your mama talks about him, the way this whole ranch still feels like it's waiting for him to come home." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She moved to the spot where Tom had died and sat down cross-legged, placing her stuffed dog carefully in her lap. Cole stayed where he was giving her space. "You know what I think? I think your daddy wouldn't want you carrying all this silence. I think he'd want you to tell the world about him, about how brave he was, how much he loved you. But I also think he'd understand why you can't. Not yet." The barn door opened wider, and Sarah stood silhouetted against the growing dawn light. She took in the scene, Emma on the floor, Cole keeping respectful distance, and something in her expression softened. "Breakfast is ready," she said quietly. Emma stood, walked over to Cole, and did something that stunned both adults. She reached out and took his hand just for a second, squeezing it tight. Then she ran past her mother toward the house. Sarah watched her go, then turned to Cole. "What did you say to her?" "Just told her about another girl who lost her voice for a while." Cole stood, his shoulder pulling slightly. "Mrs. McKenna, I need to tell you something about why I'm really here." Sarah's expression immediately guarded. "I knew you weren't just drifting." "No, I was drifting. But 3 weeks ago in Laramie, I heard Marcus Kane was moving north, targeting ranches along the proposed railroad route. Your ranch is on that route." Sarah's face went pale. "You came here deliberately." "No. The storm finding your place, that was chance. Or maybe fate if you believe in such things. But staying—" Cole met her eyes. "I've been tracking Kane for 2 years. He was part of my unit at Willow Creek. He's the one who gave the order to burn everything even after we knew there were no rebels. He enjoyed it." "My God." Sarah sank onto a hay bale. "You're hunting him." "Was hunting him. But something happened when I saw Emma at that window, when I saw you holding that rifle like the last soldier at the gates." Cole moved closer, his voice urgent. "Sarah, Mrs. McKenna Kane's coming. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. He wants this land, and he knows you're alone." "I'm not alone. The town's terrified of him. You said so yourself. His cousin's the sheriff. Nobody stood up for your husband, and they won't stand up for you." Sarah's jaw tightened. "So what are you suggesting, that I abandon everything Tom built?" "No. I'm suggesting you let me stay. Let me help you fight." "Why would you do that? We're nothing to you." Cole was quiet for a moment. "At Willow Creek, there was a woman, looked a bit like you. Same determination, same fierce love for her child. When Kane's men came for her daughter, she fought like a wildcat. Took 3 bullets before she went down, and she was still trying to crawl to her child when—" He stopped, unable to continue. Sarah stood abruptly. Don't you dare use my fear for Emma to manipulate." "I'm not," Cole said firmly. "I'm telling you the truth. I couldn't save that woman or her daughter. I followed orders and let it happen. But I won't let it happen again. Not here. Not to you and Emma." "And what makes you think you can stop him? You're one man with a guilty conscience." "I'm one man who knows how Kane thinks, how he operates. I know his weaknesses." Cole's expression hardened. "And I'm very, very good at what I do." "Killing, you mean?" "Protecting. There's a difference." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You're asking me to trust you with our lives. I'm asking you to let me earn that trust. And when Kane is dealt with, what then? You just ride off into the sunset?" Cole looked toward the house where Emma was probably watching from her window. "I don't know. I've been running so long, I'm not sure I remember how to stay still." "That's not good enough," Sarah said. "Emma's already getting attached to you. I can see it. If you're going to leave anyway, then maybe I won't leave." The words hung between them, surprising them both. "You don't even know us," Sarah said softly. "I know Emma needs more than silence and sorrow. I know you're carrying this ranch and your grief and your fear all alone. And I know that for the first time in 5 years, I want to stop running." Sarah turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "Tom was a good man, gentle. He'd never held a gun until we came out here. He learned because he had to, but he never became comfortable with it. You wear that colt like it's part of your body." "I won't apologize for what I am," Cole said. "But I can promise you this: every skill I have, every instinct I've developed, I'll use to keep you and Emma safe." "And what do you want in return?" Cole considered the question. "A place to rest. Maybe a chance to be something other than what I've been. And—" He hesitated, then continued, "a reason to be the man that little girl seems to think I am." Sarah turned back to him, and he could see tears in her eyes. "She gave you Tom's button. Do you understand what that means? Tell me." The night Tom died, just before the end, he pulled that button off his shirt and gave it to Emma. Told her to keep it safe, that as long as she had it, he'd always be with her. She's carried it every day since. The fact that she gave it to you. Sarah's voice broke slightly. She's either letting go of him, or she's decided you're worthy of carrying him forward. Cole pulled the button from his pocket, studying it in the morning light. It was just a simple horn button worn smooth from Tom McKenna's working hands, but it felt heavier than it should, weighted with meaning and memory. "I'll be worthy of it," he said quietly. "I swear to you, Sarah, I'll be worthy of their trust." Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, composing herself. "Cain has 15, maybe 20 men. You're talking about odds no sane man would take. I've faced worse odds. And won. I'm still here." Sarah took a deep breath. "If you stay there are rules. You don't teach Emma violence. You don't fill her head with stories of gunfights and glory. And you don't," she paused, color rising in her cheeks, "you don't confuse things between us. This is about protection, nothing more." "Understood." But even as he agreed, Cole saw something flicker in Sarah's eyes, a loneliness that matched his own, a hunger for something more than mere survival. They stood there in the barn where her husband had died, two damaged people carrying their ghosts, and for just a moment, the possibility of something else hung in the air between them. "Breakfast is getting cold," Sarah said, finally breaking the spell, "and Emma won't eat unless we're both there." As they walked toward the house together, Cole noticed Emma had drawn something in the dust of the window, a simple picture of 3 figures holding hands. He wondered if Sarah had seen it too, this quiet wish of a silent child for a family, made whole again. The day that changed everything started with Emma speaking her first word in 18 months. It wasn't a whisper or a mumble, it was a scream that shattered the morning quiet like breaking glass. "Mama." Sarah dropped the basket of eggs she was carrying, shells and yolk splattering across the porch as she ran toward the barn. Cole was already moving, his Colt drawn, before his feet hit the ground from the loft. They converged at the well, where Emma stood frozen, pointing at something near the fence line. 3 riders approached through the morning mist, and even at a distance, Sarah recognized the lead man's swagger. Marcus Cain rode like he owned the earth beneath his horse's hooves. Flanking him were 2 of his men, Jensen with his scarred face and dead eyes, and a younger gun hand Sarah didn't recognize. "Emma, get in the house," Sarah said, but her daughter didn't move. She stood rooted to the spot, trembling but defiant, as if speaking that one word had broken something loose inside her. "Stay," Emma said, her voice rusty but clear. She looked at Cole. "Please stay." It was Cole who moved first, scooping Emma up with his good arm and carrying her to the porch despite her struggles. "Watch from the window," he told her gently. "Your mama needs to know you're safe." Cain and his men stopped just outside the property line, close enough to talk, far enough to make any gunplay risky. Marcus Cain was handsome in the way a rattlesnake is beautiful, sleek, dangerous, mesmerizing if you didn't know better. His black suit was immaculate. Despite the dusty ride, his silver gun catches glinting in the morning sun. "Mrs. McKenna," he called out, touching his hat brim in mock courtesy. "Lovely morning, isn't it? I heard you'd taken in a boarder. Thought I'd come introduce myself properly." "State your business and move on, Cain," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. Cain's smile widened. "Now, is that any way to treat a neighbor, especially one who's come with such a generous offer?" He pulled a folded paper from his jacket. $20,000 for your ranch, Mrs. McKenna. That's 5 times what your late husband paid for it." "My husband's blood is worth more than your money." "Blood's worth nothing when you're dead," Cain replied, his tone still conversational. "Ask Tom." Cole stepped forward, then positioning himself slightly in front of Sarah. Cain's attention shifted, and his expression changed to surprise, then recognition, then something like delight. "Well, well, Cole Brennan, the famous dead hand himself." Cain laughed, rich and genuine. "Boys, you know who this is. This is the man who killed 17 men at Devil's Canyon, The Ghost of Willow Creek. "Hello, Marcus," Cole said quietly. "You two know each other?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. "Know each other?" Kane grinned. "We're old comrades in arms. Burned our way through Indian territory together on government orders. Remember that village, Cole? What was it called? Willow Creek. You were magnificent that day. Efficient, ruthless, following orders like a perfect soldier. That was a lifetime ago." "Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're still the same man. Still carrying that Colt, still wearing it, tied down." Kane's eyes glittered with malice. "Tell me, Mrs. McKenna, did he mention the children? There were 11 of them, if memory serves. The youngest was, 4 years old?" Sarah's face had gone pale, but she didn't step away from Cole. "He told me what happened." "Did he tell you he shot 3 of them himself?" "Direct orders," he said. "Just following orders." Kane leaned forward in his saddle. "That's the man you've got protecting you, a child killer. I've done things I'm not proud of," Cole said, his voice carrying across the space between them. "But I'm done following orders from men like you." "Men like me? We're the same Cole. We're both killers. The only difference is I'm honest about it." From the house came a sound, Emma pounding on the window. She was trying to get out, but Sarah had locked the door. Her face was pressed against the glass, tears streaming down her cheeks, but her eyes were fierce. "Ah, the little mute," Kane observed. "Not so mute anymore, I hear. Trauma does strange things to children, doesn't it? Cole makes them go quiet, or makes them scream. You remember the screaming, don't you?" Cole's hand moved to his gun, but Sarah caught his wrist. "Don't. That's what he wants." Kane chuckled. "Smart woman. You should listen to her, Cole. Besides, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make a business proposition." He held up the paper again. 20,000, Mrs. McKenna. You could go anywhere, start over, give your daughter a real life away from all this unpleasantness. "This is our home," Sarah said firmly. "For now." Kane's smile never wavered. "But the railroad's coming through one way or another. You can take my money and leave with dignity, or—" He shrugged. "Well, Tom found out what 'or' looks like." "You son of a bitch," Sarah snarled, and now it was Cole holding her back. "Temper, temper," Kane said. "Though I do admire your spirit. Tom was lucky to have you, right up until the end." He turned his attention back to Cole. "I'll give you a choice old friend. Ride out today, and I'll let you go. Stay, and when I come back, and I will come back, you'll die alongside them." "If you come back," Cole said evenly, "you better bring more than 2 men." Kane laughed again. "Oh, I will. Count on it." He wheeled his horse around, then paused. "1 week, Mrs. McKenna. After that, my offer expires, and things get complicated." As they rode off, Jensen called back over his shoulder, "Hey, Dead Hand, that little girl's about the same age as the ones at Willow Creek, ain't she? Must bring back memories." Cole stood rigid, watching them disappear into the distance. Sarah could see his knuckles white where he gripped his gun, could feel the rage rolling off him in waves. "Cole," she started, but he was already walking away, heading for the barn. The door burst open behind them, and Emma came flying out, her face flushed with fury and fear. She ran straight to Cole, wrapping her arms around his legs before he could escape. "Don't go." The words tore from her throat, raw and desperate. "Don't leave. You promised. You promised you'd stay." Cole froze, looking down at this fierce little girl clinging to him like he was the only solid thing in a crumbling world. "Emma, You're not him." Emma shouted, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You're not the bad man. The bad man killed Daddy. You're good. You fix the fence, and you tell stories, and you keep Mama's coffee warm, and you're good." Sarah had never heard Emma string so many words together, not even before Tom's death. The dam had broken, and everything Emma had been holding inside came pouring out. "I drew you," Emma continued, tears streaming. "I drew all of us together, a family. We could be a family if you stayed. Please, please don't go. Everyone goes. Daddy went. Don't go too." Cole dropped to his knees, and Emma threw herself into his arms, sobbing against his shoulder. Over her head, his eyes met Sarah's, and she saw everything there: the pain, the guilt, the desperate desire to be the man this child believed him to be. "I'm not going anywhere," he said, his voice rough. "You hear me, Emma? I'm staying right here." Emma pulled back, studying his face with those two serious eyes. "Promise. I promise. Pinky promise." She held out her small finger dirt under the nail, steady as stone. Cole looked at that tiny finger for a long moment, then linked his own with it. "Pinky promise." Emma nodded, satisfied, then turned to her mother. "Mama, Mr. Cole needs to teach me to shoot." Sarah started. "Emma, no. The bad man's coming back." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, now eerily calm. "Daddy couldn't shoot good enough. Mr. Cole can teach me. I need to protect us too." "You're 7 years old," Sarah said weakly. "I was 6 when Daddy died. Age doesn't matter when bad things happen." Emma looked between them. "Does it?" Cole stood slowly, lifting Emma with him. "How about we start with something else? Tracking, maybe. Reading signs. Knowing trouble's coming is better than shooting when it gets here." Emma considered this. "Can you teach me to throw knives too?" Despite everything, Sarah found herself almost smiling. "Where did you even hear about throwing knives?" "Mrs. Henderson's dime novels," Emma admitted. "I can read, Mama. I just couldn't talk." "All this time," Sarah's voice broke, "you could have written notes, communicated somehow." "Words hurt too much," Emma said simply. "Every word felt like saying goodbye to Daddy. But now," she looked at Cole, "now words feel like saying hello to something new." They stood there in the morning sun, an unlikely trio. A widow, a gunfighter, and a little girl who'd found her voice in defending a killer's redemption. The moment stretched fragile and perfect until Sarah noticed something. "Cole," she said quietly, "your shoulder's bleeding again." He glanced down at the spreading red stain. The sudden movement when Emma screamed had torn his stitches. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. Emma, go get the medical supplies, the good ones from the top shelf." Emma ran off, and Sarah stepped closer to Cole. "What you did at Willow Creek is what I did," he finished. "Kane wasn't lying. I killed those children. Following orders, yes, but I pulled the trigger. And you've been dying inside ever since. That doesn't absolve me." "No," Sarah agreed. "But Emma's right. You're not that man anymore. That man wouldn't have stayed, wouldn't have made a promise to a broken little girl, wouldn't be standing here bleeding ready to face 20 men for strangers." "You're not strangers anymore," Cole said softly. Sarah reached up her hand, hovering near his face, but not quite touching. "What are we then?" Before he could answer, Emma came running back, arms full of bandages and bottles. "Mama, I found something else." She held up a piece of paper, the deed to the ranch. "It was in Daddy's medicine box. Look at the back." Sarah took the paper and turned it over. In Tom's careful handwriting were the words, "If something happens to me, remember this land is yours, my loves. Fight for it. It's worth fighting for." He knew, Sarah whispered. He knew Kane might come for him, and he still stood his ground. "Because he had something worth protecting," Cole said. Sarah looked up at him, and this time she did touch his face, her palm gentle against his stubbled cheek. "So do you now." Emma watched them with bright eyes. "Does this mean Mr. Cole can stay forever?" "Nothing's forever, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "But some things are worth trying for forever," Cole added, covering Sarah's hand with his own. "Even if we only get today." Emma nodded solemnly. "Then we better make today count. The bad man gave us a week. What are we going to do?" Cole and Sarah exchanged looks. The child who hadn't spoken for 18 months was now their voice of reason, cutting straight to the heart of things. "We're going to get ready," Cole said. "We're going to turn this ranch into something Marcus Kane's never seen before, a place that fights back. And we're going to do it together," Sarah added, surprising herself with the fierceness in her voice. "As a family." The word hung in the air, family, not by blood or law, but by choice and circumstance, and the strange alchemy that turned strangers into something more. Emma grabbed both their hands, pulling them toward the house. "Come on, then," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We've got work to do. And, Mama, you need to teach me to shoot that Winchester. Mr. Cole can't teach me everything." As they walked together toward the house, Cole felt something shift inside his chest. Not the wound, but something deeper. The ghosts of Willow Creek were still there, would always be there. But for the first time in 5 years, they weren't the loudest voices in his head. The loudest voice belonged to a 7-year-old girl who decided he was worth saving and who'd spoken her first words in 18 months to make sure he knew it. The decision that shocked everyone, including themselves, happened at sunset 3 days after Kane's visit. Sarah stood at the kitchen table, studying the maps Cole had drawn of their defense positions when he said the words that changed everything. "Marry me." Sarah's coffee cup shattered on the floor, hot liquid splashing across the worn boards. "What did you just say?" Cole didn't repeat himself. He stood by the window, watching the dying light paint the mountains red, his expression unreadable. "Kane's going to hit us with everything he has in 4 days. If something happens to you, Emma becomes a ward of the state. And in this state, that means she goes to Kane's cousin, the sheriff. That's your proposal, a legal maneuver." Sarah's voice was sharp, but her hands trembled as she reached for a cloth to clean the spilled coffee. "It's practical. I adopt Emma legally as my daughter. No one can take her. Not Kane, not the state, no one. You've known us a week. I've known war for 20 years. I know what's coming." Cole turned to face her. "This isn't about romance, Sarah. It's about survival." From the doorway, a small voice spoke. "I think it's a good idea." They both spun to find Emma standing there in her nightgown, that stuffed dog clutched in her arms. She'd been listening as she always did, absorbing everything with those watchful eyes. "Emma, this is adult business," Sarah started. "No, it's family business." Emma walked into the room barefoot and determined. "And we're a family now, aren't we?" "That's what you said. Families protect each other. This protects us." "Marriage is more than protection, sweetheart," Sarah said gently. "It's a promise before God." "God watched Daddy die," Emma interrupted, her voice flat. "I don't think he cares much about our promises, but the law does. And Mr. Cole's right. If the bad men hurt you, I need somewhere to belong." The brutal practicality of it, delivered in that child's voice, made Sarah's chest ache. When had her little girl become this pragmatic survivor? "There's more," Cole said quietly. "A wife can't be compelled to testify against her husband. Whatever happens when Kane comes, you'd be protected legally." Sarah laughed, bitter and short. "You're planning to do something that would require my testimony. I'm planning to do whatever it takes to keep you both alive. Some of that might not be strictly legal. And what about after, when Kane's dealt with, what then?" Cole met her eyes directly. "Then we get the marriage annulled. You go on with your life. I move on, clean break." Just like that. Just like that. Emma made a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a growl. She marched over to Cole and kicked him in the shin. Hard. "Ow, Emma, what?" "You're a liar," she shouted, her face red with fury. "You pinky promised you'd stay. Now you're already planning to leave." "Emma, No." She kicked him again, then turned on her mother. "And you're going to let him go. Just like that, after he fixed the fence and taught me to track and made you smile when you think no one's looking." Sarah's face flushed. "Emma McKenna, you do not—" "I'm Emma Brennan," the girl said firmly. "If you two get married, I'm Emma Brennan, and Brennans don't run. That's what Mr. Cole told me yesterday. He said Brennans stand their ground." "I was talking about my grandfather," Cole said weakly. "Well, I'm talking about us." Emma crossed her arms, looking like a miniature version of her mother in full fury. "If you marry Mama just to leave, I'll never forgive you. Never. I'll hate you worse than I hate Marcus Kane." The room fell silent. Outside, a coyote howled long and mournful. Sarah looked between her daughter and Cole. Seeing something she hadn't expected, Cole looked genuinely stricken by Emma's words. "I don't want you to hate me," he said softly. "Then don't leave." Emma's anger melted into tears. "Please don't leave. We need you, not just for the bad men, for after, for always." Sarah knelt beside her daughter, gathering her close. "Baby, we can't force Mr. Cole to stay. That's not how it works." "Why not?" Emma pulled back, looking at her mother with those two wise eyes. "You forced yourself to stay. After Daddy died, you stayed for me. Why can't he stay for us?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Cole moved to the table, sitting down heavily like his legs couldn't hold him anymore. He pulled Tom's button from his pocket, setting it on the scarred wood. "Your daddy gave you this the night he died," he said to Emma. "You gave it to me my second night here. Why?" Emma wiped her nose on her sleeve. "Because Daddy would have liked you. He would have wanted you to stay." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." Emma pulled away from her mother and walked to the table. "The night Daddy died, he told me to be brave. He said Mama would need help and someone would come. He said I'd know them when I saw them. He said they'd be wounded, but not broken. Lost, but not gone." She looked up at Cole. "That's you." Sarah made a soft sound, her hand going to her throat. "Tom said that." Emma nodded. "He said love comes in strange packages sometimes, that the best families are the ones you choose, not the ones you're born into." Cole looked at Sarah, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "I don't know how to be a husband. I sure as hell don't know how to be a father." "You've been being both for days now," Sarah said quietly. "You just didn't notice." "Sarah, no, let me finish." She stood, squaring her shoulders. "You're right. Marriage is practical. It protects Emma. It protects me legally. But that's not why I'm going to say yes." Both Cole and Emma stared at her. "I'm saying yes because when you look at Emma, I see the man you could be gentle, patient, protective without being violent. I'm saying yes because you make me coffee every morning without being asked, and you know I take 2 sugars when I'm sad and none when I'm angry. I'm saying yes because you stayed even when every instinct probably told you to run." She moved closer to him, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. "But mostly, I'm saying yes because Emma's right. We're already a family. We just haven't admitted it yet." "This is insane," Cole said. "You don't know what you're agreeing to. I have nightmares. I wake up reaching for my gun. I've killed more men than I can count. And I held my husband while he bled out." Sarah interrupted. "I know what violence is, Cole. I know what it costs. But I also know what it's like to face it alone. I don't want to do that anymore. The town will talk. Let them. Cain will use it against us. Say you're dishonoring Tom's memory. Tom would understand. He always was more practical than proud." Cole stood slowly like an old man, feeling his bones. "If we do this when we do this because apparently it's been decided, I need you to understand something. I can't promise forever. I can't promise I'll be good at this. All I can promise is that I'll try. Every day I'll try." "That's all anyone can promise," Sarah said. Emma looked between them, then sighed dramatically. "So are you going to kiss her or not?" "Emma." Sarah's face went scarlet. "What Mrs. Henderson's books say, there's supposed to be kissing. It seals the deal." Cole laughed a real laugh, possibly the first Sarah had heard from him. "Mrs. Henderson's books, huh? She has a whole trunk of them, very educational." "I'll bet." Cole looked at Sarah, his expression softening. "What do you think? Should we seal the deal?" Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I suppose, for Emma's education." Cole stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and soap and something uniquely him. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her cheekbone with surprising gentleness. "Sarah McKenna," he said softly, "you are the strongest, stubbornest, most magnificent woman I've ever met. I don't deserve this chance, but I swear I'll earn it." "Stop talking," she whispered, "and kiss me." He did. It was gentle and careful, like he was afraid she might break or run. Sarah made a soft sound and pressed closer, her hands coming up to grip his shirt. The kiss deepened, and for a moment, the world outside Kane, the threats, the deadline, all faded away. "You," Emma said cheerfully, but also finally. They broke apart, both breathing hard. Sarah's face was flushed, and Cole looked stunned like he'd been hit with a board. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, trying to steady her voice. "We'll ride to town tomorrow, find the judge." "Judge Whelan won't do it," Emma piped up. "He's scared of Mr. Kane, but Reverend Douglas will. He married the Hendersons last year, and he doesn't care what anyone thinks." "How do you know all this?" Cole asked. "I listen. People forget mute kids have ears." Emma grinned, looking more like the child she should be than Sarah had seen in years. "Plus, Mrs. Henderson will love it. A dangerous gunfighter marrying a widow to protect her and her daughter. It's just like Desert Rose of Vengeance, her favorite dime novel." "Of course it is," Sarah muttered. Then louder, "Bed, young lady. We have a big day tomorrow." Emma hugged them both hard, fierce hugs that said everything words couldn't. As she headed to her room, she paused at the doorway. "Mr. Cole, when you marry Mama, do I call you Pa?" Cole's voice was rough when he answered. "You call me whatever feels right, little one." Emma nodded. "I'll think about it. Night, Mama. Night. Dad." She was gone before either adult could respond, leaving them standing in the kitchen with that word Dad hanging in the air like a benediction. "She's something else," Cole said finally. "She's everything," Sarah corrected. "And now you're agreeing to protect everything." "Are you sure about this?" Cole picked up Tom's button from the table, then walked over and placed it on the mantel right next to Tom's picture. Not replacing, just joining. "I've been sure of exactly 3 things in my life," he said. "That I'd follow orders at Willow Creek and regret it forever. That I'd run from what I'd done until I couldn't run anymore. And that when you opened that door in the storm, something in my life fundamentally changed." "That's not an answer." He turned to her, and Sarah saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Peace. Not complete, not perfect, but the beginning of it. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm sure." Outside, thunder rolled across the valley, promising another storm. But inside the McKenna Ranch, soon to be the Brennan Ranch, a different kind of promise had been made, one born of necessity perhaps, but already growing into something more. In her room, Emma knelt by her bed and did something she hadn't done since her father's death. She prayed, not for safety, not for Marcus Kane to go away, but for the strange wounded man who'd wandered into their lives to understand what she already knew he was home. The morning after the wedding was nothing like Sarah had imagined a morning after should be. She woke to the sound of hammering and found Cole on the roof patching holes before the next storm. Emma sat on the porch below, calling up helpful suggestions that mostly involved adding a crow's nest for keeping watch. "You know," Martha Henderson said, appearing with her usual lack of announcement, "most newlyweds spend their first morning somewhat differently." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "It's not that kind of marriage, Martha." Martha's knowing look said she wasn't buying it. "That why you're wearing his shirt over your dress?" Sarah looked down, mortified. She'd grabbed Cole's shirt from the barn when she'd gone to check on him at dawn, finding his makeshift bed empty. It smelled like him leather and gunpowder and something wild. "The morning was cold," she said weakly. "Sure it was." Martha settled her bulk into the porch chair. "The whole town's buzzing, you know. Sarah McKenna married that dangerous drifter not 24 hours after Tom's been gone a year and a half. It's been 18 months and 6 days, Sarah said quietly. And Tom would understand. I know he would, honey. Tom was practical above all else. It's everyone else who's got opinions. Martha pulled out her knitting. Sheriff came by my place this morning. Asked a lot of questions about your new husband. Sarah tensed. Kane's cousin. What did you tell him? The truth. That Cole Brennan's the first person to make you smile since Tom passed. That Emma's talking again. That maybe something good's come out of all this tragedy. From the roof, Cole's voice drifted down. Emma, sweetheart, I need those nails now." "Coming, Dad." Emma scrambled up the ladder with the agility of a squirrel, a handful of nails clutched in her small fist. The word "Dad" still made Sarah's chest tight. Emma had tried it on like a new dress, sometimes using Cole, sometimes Mr. Cole, but increasingly Dad when she forgot to be careful. "She's healing," Martha observed. "That child's been walking around with a hole in her heart, and that man's filling it." "He's going to leave." Sarah said the words bitter on her tongue. "When this is over, when Cain's dealt with, he'll leave." "Will he now?" Martha nodded toward the roof, where Cole was teaching Emma how to properly seal shingles, his patience endless despite her constant questions. "Because from where I'm sitting, that man's putting down roots. He's fixing things, so we'll be safe after he's gone." "Sarah McKenna, sorry, Brennan. You're the smartest woman I know, and the blindest. That man looks at you like you hung the moon. And Emma, he'd die for that child. Dying's not the same as staying." Before Martha could respond, horses appeared on the horizon. 3 riders moving fast. Cole was off the roof and armed before Sarah could blink, pushing Emma behind him. "Inside," he ordered, but Emma shook her head. "It's the Carlson boys," she said, squinting into the distance. "I recognize that ugly paint horse Jake rides." She was right. The 3 Carlson brothers, Jake, Matthew, and young Pete, rode up to the house, dust swirling around them. They were good men, had been friends of Tom's, but they'd kept their distance since his death. "Mrs. Mrs. Brennan." Jake touched his hat. "Mr. Brennan, we heard about the marriage. Come to offer congratulations and—" He hesitated, glancing at his brothers. "And our help." Cole lowered his gun, but didn't holster it. "Help!" Matthew, the middle brother, spoke up. "We know Cain's coming. The whole valley knows. He's been recruiting, offering good money for guns. Got maybe 15-20 men lined up. And you're here because Tom McKenna was a good man." Pete said barely 18, but trying to sound older. "And because Cain's had this coming for a long time. We couldn't stand up for Tom. We were cowards, plain and simple. But we can stand up now." Jake dismounted, the others following. "We're not gunfighters, Mr. Brennan, but we can shoot, and we know this land. Our ranch shares your eastern border. Cain wants to come at you from that direction. He'll have to come through us first." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. "You do that risk Cain's anger." "Ma'am, we've been living with shame for 18 months, Matthew said quietly. "We heard Tom call for help that night, and we didn't come. Can't change that. But we can change what happens next." Cole studied them for a long moment, then holstered his Colt. "Can you boys handle rifles?" "Yes, sir." "Know anything about defensive positions?" "We fought off claim jumpers few years back," Jake offered. "Know a thing or two about making land hard to take." Cole nodded slowly. "All right, we've got 4 days. Here's what we're going to do." What followed was the strangest honeymoon period any marriage had ever seen. By day, Cole turned the ranch into a fortress with the Carlson boys' help. They dug trenches, set up crossfire positions, created bottlenecks that would funnel attackers into killing fields. Emma helped carrying water and ammunition, learning to load rifles with quick, efficient movements. But it was the evenings that carved themselves into Sarah's memory. After the work was done and the Carlson boys had returned home, the 3 of them would sit on the porch, watching the sunset, paint the mountains gold and purple. Cole would tell stories not about violence or war, but about his childhood in Missouri, about fishing with his grandfather, about the time he tried to ride an unbroken stallion and ended up in a water trough. "Did it hurt?" Emma asked, curled against his side, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "My pride more than my body," Cole admitted. "Though my grandfather said I walked funny for a week." Emma giggled, actually giggled, and Sarah felt her heart crack open a little more. On the second night, Cole taught Emma to play poker with beans for stakes. She cleaned them both out, displaying a natural talent for bluffing that was slightly terrifying. "She's cheating," Cole insisted, staring at his losing hand. "There's no way she has 4 aces." "Prove it," Emma said primly, scooping her bean winnings into a jar. Tom used to say the same thing, Sarah said, then froze. It was the first time she'd mentioned Tom casually, without the weight of grief. Cole reached over and squeezed her hand. Tell me about him. So she did. She told them about Tom's terrible singing, his love for astronomy, his dream of breeding horses. Emma added her own memories, how he'd built her a treehouse, how he'd taught her to whistle, how he always smelled like hay and peppermint. He sounds like a good man, Cole said simply. He was, Sarah agreed, but he was also naive. He thought goodness was enough to protect us. You're teaching us that sometimes good people have to be dangerous too. That night, after Emma had gone to bed, Sarah found Cole in the barn cleaning weapons by lamplight. The Carlson boys had brought their rifles, and Cole was meticulously checking each one. Can't sleep? She asked. Don't sleep much before a fight, he admitted. Old habit. Sarah sat on a hay bale watching his hands move with practiced efficiency. Are we going to survive this? He looked up at her. Yes. You sound sure. I am sure, because I've got something now I haven't had in 5 years, a reason to win that goes beyond survival. He set down the rifle and moved to sit beside her. Sarah, about our arrangement. Don't, she interrupted. Don't make promises you can't keep or take back ones you've already made. Just be here now. He studied her face in the lamplight. You're wearing my shirt again. It's comfortable. It looks good on you. The air between them shifted, thickened. Sarah became acutely aware of how close he was sitting, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way his eyes had darkened. We said this wasn't that kind of marriage, she whispered. We said a lot of things. His hand came up to cup her cheek. But Emma was right. We're already a family, and families don't usually sleep in separate buildings. Cole, I'm not pushing. God knows I'm no prize. But Sarah, when this is over, if we survive, I want to try. Really try. Not just at being Emma's father, but at being your husband. Sarah's breath caught. And if you can't, if the ghosts are too loud, then you'll be no worse off than you are now. But if I can, he leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. If I can, we might have something real, something worth all this pain. She kissed him, then soft and sweet and full of possibility. When they pulled apart, both were breathing unsteadily. After, Sarah said firmly, we deal with Cain first, then we figure out us. Cole nodded, but he caught her hand as she stood to leave. Stay, just for a while. I sleep better when you're near. So she stayed curled against his side in the hay, listening to his heartbeat and the distant howl of coyotes. And for the first time since Tom's death, Sarah allowed herself to hope for after. The third day brought unexpected allies. Reverend Douglas arrived with his wife and 2 sons, all armed. The widow Patterson came with her 3 daughters who could shoot better than most men. Even old Sam Chen, who ran the general store, showed up with an ancient but well-maintained rifle. This is our valley, too, the Reverend said simply. Cain threatens one of us. He threatens all of us. By evening, they had 15 people ready to stand and fight. Not enough to match Cain's numbers, but enough to make a difference. Cole organized them into groups, teaching basic tactics, positioning them strategically around the ranch. Emma moved through it all like a small general bringing water, carrying messages, her presence, a constant reminder of what they were fighting for. She'd taken to wearing one of Tom's old hats too big for her head, but she wore it with such dignity that no one mentioned it. That night, the last night before Cain's deadline, the defenders gathered for a meal. The women had prepared food, the men shared whiskey, and for a few hours it felt almost like a celebration. Emma fell asleep in Cole's lap, her small hand clutching his shirt, that beloved stuffed dog tucked under her arm. She loves you, Sarah said softly, sitting beside them on the porch while the others talked inside. The feeling's mutual. Cole replied, his hand gentle on Emma's hair. I never thought I could feel this way about a child, especially after Willow Creek. He nodded. Every child I see reminds me of the ones I failed. But Emma, she doesn't remind me of them. She reminds me of who I could be, who I want to be. And who's that? The man you married, the father she deserves. He looked at Sarah. The husband you might want someday. Sarah leaned into him, careful not to disturb Emma. I already want him. I'm just scared to hope for him. Then let me hope for both of us, Cole said. I'm good at impossible odds. As if in response to his words, thunder rolled across the valley. Another storm was coming, but this time they were ready for it. Inside, Jake Carlson was telling a story that had everyone laughing. Martha Henderson was teaching the Patterson girls a bawdy song that would have scandalized the Reverend if he hadn't been 3 whiskeys in and singing along. Old Sam Chen was showing Pete Carlson card tricks that were definitely cheating. This was community. This was what Tom had believed in, people standing together, protecting each other, choosing courage over fear. And tomorrow they would put that belief to the test. Whatever happens, Sarah said, I'm glad you knocked on our door that night. Cole pressed a kiss to her temple. So am I. Emma stirred in his arms, mumbling something about defensive positions and bean poker. Even in sleep, she was planning, fighting, surviving. She's going to be something special, Cole said. She already is, Sarah replied. She brought you home. As the storm clouds gathered and the candles burned low, the defenders of the McKenna, now Brennan Ranch, settled in for the night. Tomorrow would bring violence and possibly death. But tonight, in this transformed barn, in this unexpected family, in this community that had finally found its courage, there was love and laughter and the kind of hope that makes the fighting worthwhile. In the morning, Marcus Kane would come with his hired guns and his threats. But he would find something he didn't expect. Not just a gunfighter and a widow and a little girl, but a family that had chosen each other, a community that had remembered its strength, and a home worth dying for. More importantly, a home worth living for. The morning Marcus Kane was supposed to come, he didn't. Instead, Sheriff Daniel Cross arrived alone, wearing his badge like armor and his relation to Kane like a shield. He rode up to the Brennan Ranch at dawn, finding the defenders already positioned rifles visible from every window and strategic point. Hell of a welcome party, Cross said, dismounting with deliberate slowness. This how you greet all your visitors now, Mrs. Brennan. Sarah stood on the porch, Winchester in hand, Cole beside her. Emma was inside with Martha Henderson, though Sarah could feel her daughter watching from the window. State your business, Sheriff, Cole said evenly. Cross pulled out a folded paper. Got a warrant here for your arrest, Brennan. Multiple counts of murder dating back to your Army days. Seems someone finally decided to press charges for Willow Creek. After 5 years, Sarah's voice was sharp. How convenient. Law doesn't have an expiration date, ma'am. Cross's smile was oily. Now Mr. Brennan can come quietly, or I can deputize Kane's men, and we do this the hard way. You mean the illegal way, Reverend Douglas said, stepping out from behind the barn with his rifle. Since when does a sheriff need hired guns to serve a warrant? Cross's expression darkened. Reverend, didn't expect to see you here. Then you haven't been paying attention. This whole valley's here. As if on cue, the Carlson brothers emerged from their positions, then the Patterson women, Sam Chen and others. 15 rifles, all trained on one sheriff. This is interference with the law, Cross said, but his voice had lost some swagger. This is community, old Sam Chen called out. Something you forgot about when you let Kane kill Tom McKenna. Cross's hand twitched toward his gun, but stopped when he heard the distinctive click of multiple hammers being cocked. I'd think real careful about your next move, Sheriff, Cole said quietly. You're alone, and we both know that warrant's not worth the paper it's written on. No federal judge signed it. No marshal endorsed it. It's just Kane pulling strings using you like he always does. You don't know what you're talking about. I know Willow Creek was classified. I know the only people who even knew about it are dead or disappeared, except Kane and me. Cole stepped forward. So either you've been talking to Kane about things way above your pay grade, or this warrant's a fake. Either way, you're done here. Cross's face had gone red. You threatening a lawman. I'm educating one, Cole replied. Here's your lesson you ride out. Now tell Cain his plan failed, or you stay and become part of something you really don't want to be part of. My cousin. Your cousin's a killer hiding behind you, Sarah interrupted, and we're done letting him. You've got 1 minute to decide. Cross looked around at the assembled defenders, his bravado crumbling. These weren't hired guns or drifters. These were taxpayers, churchgoers, the people who made the town function. And they'd all chosen a side. This isn't over, he said, mounting his horse. Yes, it is. Emma's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, small but fierce, Tom's hat on her head. You tell Mr. Cain we're not afraid anymore. None of us. Cross stared at the child who hadn't spoken for 18 months, now standing like a little general delivering terms. Without another word, he wheeled his horse and rode off. Well, Martha Henderson said, lowering her ancient shotgun. That was anticlimactic. That was just the opening move, Cole corrected. Cain's testing our resolve, seeing who's really here to fight. He'll come. Tonight, most likely, when he thinks we're tired from standing watch. Then we'd better get ready, Jake Carlson said. What followed was one of the strangest days in the valley's history. Instead of dispersing, the community dug in deeper. The women set up a field kitchen in Sarah's barn. The men reinforced defensive positions. Children were sent to the Hendersons' root cellar for safety, all except Emma, who flat refused to leave. I'm not hiding while you fight for our home, she said with such finality that even Cole didn't argue. By afternoon, more people had arrived. Word had spread through the valley like wildfire. The McKenna widow and her new husband were making a stand against Marcus Cain, and folks were choosing sides. Not everyone chose theirs. Some rode out to warn Cain to curry favor with the man they thought would win. But more stayed. By sunset, 23 people were prepared to defend the ranch. Why? Sarah asked Widow Patterson, who was teaching her daughters to load rifles in sequence for faster shooting. Why now? Why for us? The older woman's face was weathered but kind. Because your Tom was the first to say no to Cain. He died for it, but he said it. And you didn't run. You stayed, kept the ranch going, raised that remarkable child. Then this man comes along. She nodded at Cole, who was showing a group of townsmen how to create overlapping fields of fire, and suddenly saying no seems possible. He's a killer, Sarah said quietly. His past. We all got pasts, honey. What matters is what we do next. Widow Patterson checked her rifle with practiced ease. Besides, sometimes you need a killer to stop a killer. The good Lord knows we tried it the peaceful way. As darkness fell, they gathered for what might be their last meal together. The mood was somber, but determined. Reverend Douglas said a prayer that was more battle cry than benediction, asking not for peace, but for strength, not for mercy, but for justice. Cole stood to speak, and the room fell silent. I know most of you don't know me. Some of you know about me, the things I've done, the man I was. I won't stand here and tell you I'm reformed or redeemed, but I will tell you this tonight. We fight for more than land or water rights. We fight for the right to say no to men like Cain. We fight for every family he's destroyed, every home he's burned, every grave he's filled. He looked at Emma sitting between Sarah and Martha. We fight for the next generation's right to grow up without fear. And if we die tonight, we die standing up together as a community that finally remembered its courage. Amen, several voices said together. Emma stood up, her small voice carrying clearly. I want to say something too. Sarah started to protest, but Cole touched her arm, shaking his head. Emma climbed onto a chair so everyone could see her. My daddy died because he was alone. He was brave, but he was alone. Tonight, we're not alone. We're family, all of us, and families protect each other. She pulled out Tom's button, the one she'd given Cole, which he'd returned to her that morning. This was my daddy's. He told me to keep it safe, to remember him. But I don't need a button to remember. I have all of you keeping his dream alive, so I want to break it up, give everyone a piece. That way, we all carry him with us tonight." The room was dead silent as this 7-year-old girl took a hammer and carefully broke the horn button into pieces, handing a fragment to each defender. Hardened ranchers wiped their eyes. The widow Patterson openly wept. Even Cole's eyes were suspiciously bright. "For Tom," Jake Carlson said, raising his piece. "For Tom." The room echoed. "For all of us," Emma added firmly. "For the family we choose." Outside, the wind began to pick up. Cole stepped onto the porch, Sarah beside him, Emma between them. The stars were hidden behind clouds, and the air smelled of coming rain. "They'll come from the east first," Cole said quietly, "testing our defenses. When we repel, that they'll split, try to flank us from north and south simultaneously." "How do you know?" "Because it's what I do." He looked down at Emma. "When the shooting starts, you stay with Mrs. Henderson in the root cellar." "No." "Emma." "I said no. I'm staying where I can help. I can reload rifles, carry ammunition, watch for flanking movements. I'm not hiding." Sarah knelt beside her daughter. "Sweetheart, this isn't about being brave." "Yes, it is." Emma interrupted. "You taught me that, Mama, and you taught me," she looked at Cole, "that sometimes standing your ground is the only choice worth making." Before either adult could respond, a whistle came from the Eastern Watch, the Carlson boys' signal. "Riders approaching. Positions." Cole barked, and the defenders moved with surprising efficiency for civilians. Sarah grabbed Emma, pulling her behind the water trough, good cover with clear sight lines. Cole took position at the corner of the house, his rifle ready, but his Colt loose in its holster. The riders came into view, 10 men, Kane in the lead, torches held high despite the wind. They stopped just outside rifle range, and Kane rode forward alone, confident as always. "Last chance, Mrs. Brennan," he called. "Send out call sign over the ranch, and everyone else goes free." "Go to hell, Kane," Sarah shouted back. Kane laughed. Such language from a lady. What would Tom think? "Tom would be standing right where Cole is," Sarah replied. "Only difference is Cole knows how to fight back." "Yes, he does," Kane agreed. "Tell me, Brennan, did you tell them all about Willow Creek, about the children, or did you leave out those inconvenient details?" "I told them everything," Cole called back. "Just like I'll tell the federal marshals everything when they get here tomorrow." That gave Kane pause. "You're bluffing." "Telegraph went out this morning. Seems the government's very interested in your recent activities. Something about using classified information for personal gain." Cole's voice carried clearly in the night air. "They're especially interested in how you've been funding your operation. Those railroad bonds you stole from the Army payroll 5 years ago." "You can't prove anything." "I don't have to. I just have to make them look. And we both know what they'll find." Kane's controlled facade cracked. "You son of a bitch. You were there. You took your share. No, I walked away. Clean. You kept it all. And you've been using it to build your little empire ever since." Cole stepped into view, rifle lowered but ready. "It's over, Marcus. Take your men and ride out. Tonight. Don't come back. Or what you'll kill me in front of your new family. Show that little girl what you really are." Emma stood up suddenly despite Sarah's attempt to hold her back. "We already know what he is," she said, her voice carrying across the darkness. "He's the man who stayed. You're the one who runs from the law, from the truth, from everything good." Kane's face twisted with rage. "You little—" The shot came from behind Kane, one of his own men, jumpy and stupid, firing at shadows. It shattered the night, and then everything happened at once. "Cover!" Cole shouted, and the defenders opened fire, disciplined volleys just as he'd taught them. Kane's men scattered, some charging, some fleeing, all chaos and confusion. Sarah pulled Emma down, shielding her with her body as bullets whined overhead. Cole was moving his rifle, barking steadily, picking targets with lethal precision. The Carlson boys held the eastern approach, their crossfire devastating. The widow Patterson and her daughters turned the northern attack into a killing field, But Kane's men were killers too, and they pushed forward with desperate fury. One got close enough to throw a torch onto the barn roof before Jake Carlson's rifle found him. Flames began to spread despite the wind. "The barn!" Emma cried, and without thinking, she ran toward the well pump. "Emma, no!" Sarah screamed, but Cole was already moving, scooping up the child and diving behind the water trough as bullets sparked off the metal. "The horses!" Emma sobbed. "We have to save the horses. We will," Cole promised, then looked at Sarah. "Cover me." Sarah didn't hesitate. She stood and fired, levering her Winchester with desperate speed, forcing Kane's men to take cover. Cole ran for the barn, Emma right behind him despite his shouts to stay back. Together, they got the horses out, Emma leading them with surprising calm, while Cole beat at the flames with wet blankets. Others saw and came to help the Reverend Sam Chen Martha Henderson with her terrible old shotgun that somehow never missed. The fire died, but the battle raged on. Men fell on both sides. Pete Carlson took a bullet in the shoulder. Widow Patterson's eldest daughter was grazed across the ribs. But they held. They stood their ground. And then suddenly, it was over. Kane's men broke and ran, those still able to ride disappearing into the darkness. But Kane himself remained standing in the yard, his fancy suit torn and bloodied, his gun trained on Cole. "Just you and me now," Kane said, "the way it should have been from the start." Cole handed his rifle to Emma and stepped forward. "Emma, close your eyes." "No," she said firmly. "I need to see. I need to know how it ends." The two men faced each other in the yard, lit by dying embers from the barn fire. Kane's hand hovered over his gun. Cole stood relaxed, almost casual. "You know you can't beat me," Cole said quietly. "You never could. That's why you always needed others to do your killing. I killed Tom McKenna myself. You shot him while two men held him. That's not killing. That's execution. Murder." Cole's voice was steady, almost gentle. "But I'm not Tom McKenna. I'm not held by anyone, and I'm not afraid of you." Kane went for his gun. Cole's Colt appeared in his hand like magic, the sound of the shot echoing across the valley. Kane looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest, surprise on his face. "How?" he whispered. "Because I'm fighting for something," Cole said. "You're just fighting." Kane fell to his knees, then forward. He was dead before he hit the ground. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Emma walked forward and took Cole's hand, her small fingers intertwining with his. "It's finished," she said. "Daddy can rest now." Sarah joined them, her hand on Cole's shoulder. Around them, the defenders emerged from their positions, wounded but victorious. The community that had cowered for so long had finally stood up, and they'd won. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. Cole holstered his Colt, then pulled both Sarah and Emma into his arms. "Now we rebuild. We heal. We live. Together," Emma asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Together," Cole confirmed. As dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope, the defenders of the Brennan Ranch began the slow work of tending wounds and fixing damage. But there was something different in the air, a lifting of fear that had weighed down the valley for too long. Sheriff Cross arrived at midday with a federal marshal finding Kane's body and a united community ready to testify. The marshal took statements, examined evidence, and ultimately ruled the deaths as self-defense. Cross was arrested for corruption, his badge stripped, his protective connection severed. But none of that mattered as much as the moment when Emma, exhausted and filthy from the night's events, looked up at Cole and said, "We did it, Dad. We protected our home." Cole knelt and hugged her tight, his voice rough with emotion. "Yes, we did, little one. We did." 3 months had passed since Kane's defeat. The ranch had healed, the community had grown stronger, and the Brennan family had settled into something approaching normal. Emma rode her pony every morning, practicing the skills Cole taught her. Sarah managed the ranch books and correspondence with increasing orders for their horses. Cole worked the land with a dedication that suggested permanence. Though he'd never actually said the words, Sarah longed to hear that he was staying forever. Then the drought came. It started subtly in late July, the usual afternoon thunderstorms failing to materialize. By August, the creek ran low. By September, it was a trickle. The grass turned brown and brittle, crunching underfoot, like broken promises. "We need to sell some cattle," Sarah said one evening, studying their ledgers by lamplight. "We don't have enough water for all of them." Cole nodded, but his attention was on Emma, who sat by the window drawing. She'd been quiet lately, not the traumatized silence of before, but a watchful waiting, as if she sensed something coming. "The Hendersons sold their entire herd yesterday," Sarah continued. "Took a loss, but at least they got something. If we wait much longer—" A scream split the night, not human, but equine. Cole was moving before the sound died, grabbing his rifle as he ran for the door. Sarah followed Emma right behind, despite being told to stay inside. The scene in the corral was chaos. Their prize stallion Tempest was down, thrashing in the dirt. Even in the moonlight, they could see the foam around his mouth, the unnatural arch of his neck. "Poison," Cole said grimly, kneeling beside the dying animal. "Strychnine, from the look of it." "Who would?" Sarah began, then stopped. They all knew who. Marcus Kane was dead, but his shadow lingered. Some of his men had scattered to the winds, but others had stayed in the territory, bitter and looking for revenge. Lately, there'd been signs, cut fence lines, dead cattle with no clear cause, wells mysteriously going bad. Tempest gave one final shudder and went still. Emma stood, frozen tears streaming down her face. That horse had been one of Tom's last acquisitions, his hope for the ranch's future. "They're trying to break us," Sarah said quietly. "Without water, without healthy livestock, we can't survive." Cole stood slowly, his expression hard. "Then we need to find water." "There is no water. Every creek, every spring in the valley is dry or dying." "Not every spring." Cole looked toward the mountains. "Tom ever mentioned the old Apache springs up in the high country?" Sarah frowned. "He said something once about sacred waters, but Cole, those are on reservation land. It's forbidden." "Not if we're invited." The next morning, Cole rode out alone despite Sarah's protests. He returned at sunset with an unexpected companion, an elderly Apache man named Joseph Crow Feather, wearing traditional dress mixed with ranch clothes, his face weathered, but his eyes sharp. "Mrs. Brennan," Joseph said, dismounting with surprising agility, "your husband speaks of great need. Our wells are failing. Our creek is dry. Without water, we'll lose everything." Joseph studied her, then looked at Emma, who watched from the porch. "The child who found her voice. I have heard this story. My grandson trades at Chen's store. The whole territory knows of the night you stood against Kane." "Will you help us?" Emma asked, stepping forward. "The springs are sacred. They are not for outsiders." Joseph paused, then added, "But you are no longer outsiders. You bled for this land. You defended it. The land has accepted you." He pulled out a worn leather map, spreading it on the porch rail. "The journey is difficult. 2 days up if the weather holds. The springs are here." He pointed to a mark in the mountains. "But there is a condition." "Name it," Cole said. "You must bring the community, all who stood with you against Kane. The springs will provide, but only for those who come in unity, not greed." Sarah and Cole exchanged glances. Organizing the entire community for a mountain expedition during a drought seemed impossible. "There's more," Joseph continued. "The journey must be led by the youngest warrior, the one who broke her silence to defend her family." Everyone looked at Emma, who straightened her small shoulders. "I'll do it." "Emma, you're 8 years old," Sarah protested. "I was 7 when I watched Daddy die, 8 when I helped fight Kane. Age doesn't matter when you're needed." She looked at Joseph. "What do I have to do?" Joseph smiled, the first warmth he'd shown. "Be yourself, child. The springs respond to pure hearts and clear purpose. You have both." Word spread quickly through the valley. The drought had everyone desperate, and the promise of water, even with strange conditions, brought people to the Brennan Ranch. Not everyone believed, but enough did. The Carlsons, the Hendersons, Widow Patterson and her daughters, Reverend Douglas and his family Sam Chen closing his store to join them. 23 families ultimately agreed to make the journey, bringing wagons loaded with empty barrels, hope and skepticism in equal measure. The morning they set out, the sky was the color of old bone, cloudless and merciless. Emma rode at the front on her pony Tom's hat, shading her face, Cole and Sarah flanking her. Behind them, a convoy of desperate hope wound into the mountains. The first day was brutal. The trail was barely visible, winding through steep switchbacks and narrow passages. 2 wagons broke wheels. An elderly man collapsed from heat and had to be carried. But they pressed on, Emma never wavering, always looking ahead. That night, they camped on a plateau overlooking the dying valley. The mood was grim. Several families talked of turning back. "This is foolishness," grumbled Carl Morrison, a rancher who joined at the last minute, following a child into the mountains chasing Apache fairy tales. "Then why did you come?" Emma asked, appearing at his campfire with that unsettling directness children possess. Morrison scowled. "Because I'm desperate, girl. We all are." Desperate enough to believe, Emma pulled out a small object, a piece of Tom's button, the one she'd broken and shared. "You kept this. You were there the night we fought Cain. You believed then." That was different. That was fighting men, not chasing myths. Emma studied him with those 2 old eyes. "Mr. Morrison, what's your son's name?" "The one who's sick." Morrison stiffened. His youngest had been battling fever for weeks, growing weaker as the water grew scarcer. "Timothy. What of it?" "Timothy needs water, clean water, not the muddy stuff we're rationing." Emma looked around the campfire at the other doubters. "All our children need water. Our animals need water. Our land needs water. Does it matter if it comes from Apache Springs or heavenly rain? Water is water." "The girl's got a point," Martha Henderson said, settling her bulk on a rock. "Besides, we've come this far. Might as well see it through." That night, Cole found Emma sitting apart from the camp, staring at the stars. "Heavy thoughts for a small person," he said, sitting beside her. "Joseph told me something else," Emma said quietly. "He said the springs would test us, that not everyone would be worthy." "What kind of test?" "He didn't say, just that I'd know when it came." She looked up at him. "What if I fail? What if I lead everyone up here for nothing?" Cole put his arm around her. "You know what I learned at Willow Creek. Sometimes failure isn't about the outcome. It's about not trying at all. You're trying. That already makes you better than I was for most of my life. You tried. You stayed with us. Only after running for 5 years." He pulled her close. "You've got more courage in your little finger than I've got in my whole body." "That's not true," Emma said, "but it's nice of you to say." The second day brought new challenges. The trail grew steeper, more treacherous. They had to abandon 2 wagons, transferring their barrels to the remaining vehicles. Then, near midday, they hit a wall, literally. A rock slide had obliterated the trail, leaving a sheer cliff face. "That's it then," Morrison said. "We go back." "No," Emma said, studying the obstacle. She dismounted and was running her small hands over the rocks. "There's another way. Look." She pointed to what seemed like solid stone, but as they looked closer, they could see it a narrow passage barely wide enough for a person almost invisible, unless you were looking at child's height. "The wagons won't fit," Jake Carlson observed. "Then we carry the barrels," Emma said simply. "All of us, together." It took 6 hours. Every able-bodied person from 8 to 80 formed a human chain through the passage. They passed barrel supplies, even dismantled wagon wheels through the narrow gap. When Morrison's strength failed, the Reverend took his place. When the widow Patterson stumbled, Sarah caught her. When little Timothy Morrison grew too weak to walk, Cole carried him. On the other side of the passage, the landscape changed. The air grew cooler, tinged with moisture. Green moss appeared on the rocks, and then they heard the sound of running water. The springs were nothing like Sarah had imagined. She'd expected a small pool, maybe a trickle. Instead, they found a series of natural terraces, water cascading from one level to the next, so clear you could see the bottom even at the deepest point. Steam rose from some pools while others were crystal cold. The place felt ancient, untouched, sacred. "My God," Reverend Douglas whispered, "it's paradise." But Emma didn't move toward the water. She stood at the edge of the springs, trembling. "Something's wrong." That's when they saw him, Joseph Crow Feather, standing beside the largest pool, but not alone. With him were a dozen Apache warriors, painted for ceremony, armed with rifles. "The test," Joseph called out. "You have come seeking water, but first you must answer for the past." "What past?" Sarah demanded, stepping forward. "This valley was ours before it was yours. Your people drove us out killed. Our families took our sacred places." Joseph's voice was stern but not cruel. "Now you come seeking help from the springs you once would have destroyed. Why should the water accept you?" Morrison stepped forward, angry. "We didn't do those things. That was a generation ago. And yet you benefit from it," one of the warriors said. "Your ranches sit on our hunting grounds. Your cattle drink from streams we once protected." The crowd grew restless, hands moving to weapons. This was about to go very bad, very quickly. Then Emma walked forward alone until she stood directly in front of Joseph. "You're right," she said, her clear voice carrying across the springs. "We took things that weren't ours. We built on land we didn't understand. We brought violence to peaceful places." "Emma," Sarah started, but Cole held her back. "But we also bled for it," Emma continued, "not to take it, but to protect it. From men like Cain, who would have destroyed everything your sacred places too. We fought together that night, Apache and white Mexican and Chinese. We weren't different peoples. We were neighbors." She pulled out the pieces of Tom's button she'd kept for herself. "My daddy died trying to protect this land. Cole almost died defending it. You," she looked at the warriors, "helped us when Cain's men poisoned our wells last month. I know it was you. Mrs. Chen saw you leaving medicine for Timothy Morrison." The warriors shifted, surprised at being discovered. "The land doesn't care what color we are," Emma said. "It only cares that we love it, protect it, share it." She took a deep breath. "So here's my answer to your test. We don't deserve the water. None of us do. But our children need it. Our animals need it. The land itself needs it. So I'm asking not as white to Apache, not as rancher to warrior, but as one person who loves this place to others who love it too. Please, help us." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Joseph smiled. "The child speaks truth. The test is passed." "That's it," Morrison blustered. "All that drama for—" "The test was not whether you deserved the water," Joseph said. "It was whether you could admit you didn't. Pride has poisoned this valley more than any drought." The child showed humility. "That is the key to the springs." The warriors lowered their weapons, and Joseph gestured to the water. "Drink. Fill your barrels. But remember, this water comes with responsibility. You are not owners of this land, but caretakers. Forget that, and the springs will dry up like everything else." They spent 2 days at the springs, not just filling barrels, but learning. The Apache taught them about the underground rivers that fed the pools, showed them how to find water signs, how to conserve and protect water sources. More importantly, they shared stories, meals, understanding. Timothy Morrison, given clean water and Apache medicine, began to recover. The Reverend performed a blessing that combined Christian and Apache traditions. Sarah helped the Apache women teach the children both languages for water, earth, and sky. And Cole sat with the warriors, not talking about fighting or weapons, but about the land, about balance, about finding peace after war. For the first time since Willow Creek, he felt the possibility of true redemption, not through violence or sacrifice, but through simple human connection. The journey down was easier, not just because they knew the trail, but because they were different. The desperate individuals who'd climbed the mountain had become a true community coming down. They sang songs, shared food, helped each other without being asked. When they reached the valley, they found something impossible: clouds on the horizon. Real clouds heavy with rain. "It's a miracle," Martha Henderson said. "No," Emma corrected, watching the sky with wonder. "It's a promise. We promise to take care of the land, and the land's promising to take care of us." The rain came that night, gentle at first, then stronger. Not a destructive storm, but a healing one, soaking into the cracked earth, filling the creeks, bringing the valley back to life. Sarah found Cole standing in the rain, letting it wash over him. "You're crying," she said softly. "It's just rain." "Cole Brennan, after everything we've been through, don't you dare lie to me now." He turned to her, and she saw the truth in his eyes. The walls had finally come down, all of them. "I never thought I'd feel clean again. After Willow Creek, I thought I'd carry that stain forever. And now I understand what Emma knew all along. Redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about watering the future, helping something better grow from the ashes." Sarah kissed him, then standing in the rain, while Emma danced in puddles, and the valley celebrated its salvation. It was perfect and imperfect, messy and magnificent, everything a real family should be. But the greatest test was yet to come. Because the water had returned, the land was healing, and that meant others would want it again. The railroad was still coming, and with it would come new challenges, new threats, new chances to prove that the community forged in drought and trial could weather any storm. In the house that night, as rain drummed on the roof, Emma drew a new picture. It showed the Springs, the Apache, and the ranchers together, and water flowing down to make the whole valley green. At the bottom, in her careful child's handwriting, she wrote, "Family isn't just blood. It's everyone who shows up when the well runs dry." Cole and Sarah found it in the morning, pinned to their door with a note. "Thank you for staying. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for being my parents. Love, Emma Brennan." The drought was over, but their story, the story of a gunfighter, a widow, and a little girl who taught them both to hope, was just beginning its most important chapter. 5 years had passed since the railroad came to Prosperity Valley. The autumn morning dawned crisp and golden, painting the mountains in shades of amber and rust. Sarah Brennan stood in the doorway of the schoolhouse, watching children of every heritage stream through the gates, Apache, Mexican, Chinese, black and white, all learning together in the building that had become the heart of the valley. "Mrs. Brennan, Mrs. Brennan." A small boy ran up, gap-toothed and excited. "Emma says we're putting on a show for Founders Day." Sarah smiled, ruffling his hair. "That's right, Thomas. Emma's directing the whole thing." At 13, Emma had grown tall and strong, her blonde hair usually tied back, her father's determination mixed with her mother's grace. She moved through the crowd of children like a young general, organizing, encouraging, occasionally mediating disputes with the wisdom of someone who'd learned early that words could heal as surely as they could hurt. "Places everyone," Emma called out. "We're telling the story of our valley, and everyone has a part to play." Cole stood by the corral, teaching a group of young men, former orphans and runaways, mostly how to gentle horses without breaking their spirits. His hair had gone gray at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but he moved with the easy confidence of a man at peace with himself. "Remember," he told his students, "strength isn't about domination, it's about partnership. The horse has to choose to trust you, same as people." One of the boys, barely 16, with the angry eyes Cole recognized from his own mirror years ago, spoke up. "Mr. Brennan, is it true what they say, that you were dead hand, that you killed all those people?" The other boys went silent, watching. Cole set down the rope he'd been holding and faced them directly. "Yes," he said simply. "I was dead hand. I killed more men than I want to remember. I followed orders that haunted me for years. But you know what? He looked at each young face. That's not who I am anymore. Haven't been for 5 years. I'm Emma's father. I'm Sarah's husband. I'm your teacher. The past shapes us boys, but it doesn't have to define us. We get to choose who we become. How? The angry boy asked, and Cole heard the desperate hope beneath the hostility. By staying, Cole said. By choosing to build instead of destroy. By protecting instead of attacking. By teaching young men like you that there's another way to be strong. From across the yard, Sarah watched this interaction, her heart full. The man who'd arrived at their door, wounded and running, had become a pillar of the community, teaching not just horsemanship, but life lessons to boys who desperately needed a father figure who understood darkness, but chose light. The Founders' Day celebration began at sunset. The whole valley gathered hundreds now, where once there'd been dozens. The railroad had brought prosperity, but more importantly, the story of Prosperity Valley had brought people seeking something more than land or gold. They came seeking community. Joseph Crow Feather sat in the place of honor, the Springs Agreement having made him and his people full partners in the valley's growth. The Apache had taught water management, medicine, and tracking. In return, their children attended the school, their voices were heard in council, and their sacred places were protected by law and community commitment. Emma took the makeshift stage they'd built, no longer the silent, traumatized child, but a confident young woman. 5 years ago, she began, her voice carrying clearly, this valley was dying. Drought was killing the land. Violence was killing the people. Fear was killing hope. The crowd was silent, even the babies seeming to sense the importance of this moment. But then something changed. Not the weather, not at first. Us. We changed. We decided to stop being afraid. We decided to stand together. We decided that our differences made us stronger, not weaker. She began calling people forward, each representing a part of their story. The Carlson brothers, who'd started a cooperative that helped new families get established. Widow Patterson, who ran a boarding house for traveling teachers and doctors. Sam Cheaton, whose store had become a meeting place where languages mixed and cultures merged. But most of all, Emma said, I want to call forward the two people who showed me that families aren't just born, they're chosen. They're built one day at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. Cole and Sarah came forward, and Emma took their hands. My father, Tom McKenna, died protecting this land. He died alone, afraid but brave. My dad, Cole Brennan, lived protecting this land. He lived with us, with all of us, teaching us that the hardest fight isn't against others, but against the darkness in ourselves. Cole's eyes were wet, and he didn't try to hide it. Sarah squeezed his hand. My mother, Emma continued, showed us that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about always getting back up. She lost everything and kept going. She opened her door to a stranger in a storm and ended up opening all our hearts to what community really means. Emma turned back to the crowd. The story of Prosperity Valley isn't about the railroad or the springs or even surviving Marcus Kane. It's about choosing to stay. It's about choosing to trust. It's about choosing to build something together that none of us could build alone. She pulled out a leather journal, weathered but well kept. This is our story. I've been writing it down, drawing it, preserving it, because someday people will need to know that it's possible. That Apache and settlers can share water, that former enemies can become family, that a gunfighter can become a teacher, that a widow can find love again, that a mute girl can find her voice and use it to unite a valley. The crowd erupted in applause, but Emma wasn't finished. She held up her hand for quiet. There's one more thing. Yesterday, a letter came from the territorial governor. He's heard about our school, our community, our way of doing things. He wants to make Prosperity Valley the territorial capital. He wants what we've built here to be the model for the whole territory. The implications rippled through the crowd. This would mean more growth, more challenges, but also more opportunities to show that their way worked. Cole stepped forward. This is your choice. All of yours. We built this together. We decide together. What followed was democracy in its purest form. Not voting in secret, but open discussion. Concerns were raised about losing their closeness, about outsiders not understanding their ways. Benefits were discussed: better medical care, more teachers, greater protection under law. It was young Timothy Morrison, now 13 and healthy, who settled it. We were all outsiders once. Someone gave us a chance. Shouldn't we give others the same chance? The vote was unanimous. Prosperity Valley would become the territorial capital, but on their terms, maintaining their inclusive school, their water-sharing agreements, their council that included all peoples. As the celebration continued into the night, with music that blended Apache drums with Irish fiddles and Mexican guitars, Cole and Sarah found themselves back where it all began, on their porch, watching the community they'd helped build. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked, leaning into his shoulder. "Only one," Cole said. "I wish Tom could see this, see what his sacrifice started." "He sees," Emma said, joining them, still wearing her narrator's costume. "In every child who goes to school, in every family that finds safety here, in every choice to stay and build instead of run and destroy. Daddy's dream lived just differently than he imagined." She pulled out her charcoal and paper, even now, even in the dark, needing to capture this moment. "What are you drawing?" Sarah asked. "Tomorrow," Emma said simply. "I'm drawing what tomorrow looks like." "And what does tomorrow look like?" Cole asked. Emma smiled, that rare, precious smile that transformed her serious face. "Like today, but bigger. More children in the school. More families on the land. More stories of people choosing to change." She looked up at her parents. "More proof that love is stronger than fear, that staying is braver than leaving, that the families we choose can heal the wounds the world gives us." In the distance, a train whistle sounded, not arriving or departing, just announcing its presence, its connection to the wider world. But the people of Prosperity Valley didn't look toward the sound. They looked at each other, at the community they'd built, at the future they were creating together. Martha Henderson's voice rose above the music, calling for one more toast. "To Tom McKenna, who showed us courage. To Cole Brennan, who showed us redemption. To Sarah Brennan, who showed us resilience. To Emma Brennan, who showed us hope. And to all of us who showed the world that the best way to honor the past is to build a better future." The toast echoed across the valley, carried on the wind to the sacred springs, to the railroad station, to the schoolhouse, to every corner of this land that had seen so much pain and had chosen to grow something beautiful from it. As the celebration wound down and families began heading home, Cole stood with his family on the porch. "You know what I realized tonight," he said. "What's that?" Sarah asked. "I spent 5 years running from Willow Creek, but I wasn't running from a place. I was running from the man I was there. Tonight, standing here with you both, with this community we've built, I finally understand I'm not that man anymore. Haven't been since the night I knocked on your door." Emma hugged him tightly. "You're Dad. That's all that matters." "She's right," Sarah said, wrapping her arms around them both. "The past is just prologue. This us here, now this is the real story." Above them, the stars spread across the Wyoming sky like promises, kept each one a light in the darkness, each one proof that even the darkest night gives way to dawn. And in Prosperity Valley, dawn always came with the sound of children laughing, families building, and communities choosing to stay, to fight, to hope, and to love. The wounded gunfighter had found his redemption. The grieving widow had found her strength. The silent child had found her voice. And together, they'd found what they hadn't even known they were looking for: home. Not just a place, but a purpose. Not just a family, but a future. Not just survival, but triumph. The story of Prosperity Valley would be told for generations, how a knock on a door during a storm led to a community's rebirth, how choosing to stay became the bravest act of all, how 3 broken people became whole by holding each other up. But for now, for tonight, the Brennan family stood on their porch, complete and content proof that sometimes the very best things in life come from the storms we weather together and the choice to stay when everything in us wants to run. "Come on," Emma said, tugging her parents toward the door. "Tomorrow's going to be amazing, and we need rest." As they went inside, Cole turned for one last look at the valley spread before them, peaceful under starlight. "Thank you," he whispered to whoever might be listening, God, Tom, McKenna, the universe itself. "Thank you for the storm that brought me home." The door closed gently behind them, and Prosperity Valley settled into sleep, ready for tomorrow, ready for whatever came next, ready, because they would face it together, always home.